bit. So what did these Red Guards do? Well, Mao heard about these, and he was absolutely amazed by this, that these radical organizations were coming out of nowhere and without any real political help by him. And so he thought, of course, what am I going to do? I'm going to help out the Red Guards. So what happened is he actually encouraged the Red Guards. He called for Red Guards to come at some point to Beijing and to present themselves before him so he could congratulate them. And he even offered to have accommodations and transportation paid for to come to Beijing. Now, the interesting thing is, with this Red Guard movement, another sub-counterculture, or not even really counterculture, but subculture was going on, which was this travel, right? This call by Mao to come to Beijing spurred travel all across the country. And, just like, not just like, and this is a really important distinction. In the United States, right, you had hippies going all over the country and, experiencing America, and, you got your Jack Kerouac, on the road where it's, this indulgent, individualist, exploration of yourself. Well, in contrast to that, you had the Red Guards who were interested in experiencing socialism, interested in experiencing China, interested in experiencing revolution and how they could be a part of it. So then, rather than visiting, or doing drugs and getting drunk and all that jazz and engaging in it's all about the music, man. No, they would actually go to poor peasant farms to learn, to work, and the peasants themselves would offer lodging and accommodation. And the PLA, I mean, this happened constantly. The PLA would have troops moving in trucks. And they would say, well, why don't you jump on board? And sometimes they would. They jump on, well, how is it in the PLA? As a soldier, what do you think? What do you think about Mao Zedong thought? What do you think about Czechoslovakia? What do you think about Vietnam? And there was this really, vibrant discussion, even between the soldiers and the students. But a lot of times they'd say, no, that's okay. We're walking. We're going to walk all of the distance, from Shanghai to Beijing. We're going to walk all the distance from our university or our village to Beijing because we want to experience what it is to walk China, right? And they would visit the locations of, Henan, which was one of the main bases for Mao, and they would go participate in the Long March or look at sites of the Long March or go to key battles and sites and talk to people and ask what it was like. And so you had this massive movement throughout all of China, and it even became called the Great Link-Up. Now, let me see. Again, I have really bad notes, so I'm having difficulty finding things. But I'll talk to it later. Keep in mind the late Link-Up. There were 4 great rights. Oh, here we go. There were 4 great rights that Mao instituted, and he demanded for everyone. And the 4 great rights were the right to speak out freely, to air one's views fully, that is to not have them cut short, to write big character posters, and to hold great debates. And these were actually held as rights. Now, I mean, let's just for a moment compare and contrast that with our capitalist free speech rights. There's the most obvious, which is a bunch of anti-war activists were raided. This being, it's now September the 30th, 2010, and just a week ago, we had a bunch of anti-war activists raided for little more than saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't, support imperialist wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, or maybe we shouldn't support death squads in Colombia, and maybe we shouldn't support the genocide of the Palestinian people. Their property was raided. They were subpoenaed for grand jury. And this is, given that we have this First Amendment free speech right. Okay, let's put that aside for the moment. Okay, let's rule that out. Okay, you at least, and I at least have free speech. But if I wrote all my views and put them on all the walls of, let's say, downtown Provo, how long do you think that would last? How long before I would be arrested for vandalism? Pretty quickly. If I were to begin holding a debate at Pioneer Park and to begin inviting people off the street to have a debate. And we have a debate so large that we begin moving into Center Street and Parkway Avenue and begin discussing and going to every single store to pull people in to discuss what revolution should look like in the United States. And we began, bringing everyone in to talk. How long do you think it would be before the cops showed up and first ordered us to disperse, and then started tear gassing or beating or arresting? Okay. In this case, free speech was radically allowed. Now, I'll touch very briefly on the dark side of the Cultural Revolution. Free speech was fully allowed. Full mass participation was fully allowed. And working class people and students were mobilized against revisionism and against oppression. Well, here's the problem. If the police are not really attacking anyone, not enforcing anything, what happens when the Red Guards get out of control? Quite frequently, they would take people who were capitalists, or parents were capitalists, or family was capitalist, and they would pull them out of the street and humiliate them. And talk about their family, make them wear dunce caps. One of the most famous events, I believe it was the mayor of Beijing, was pulled out of his office. His wife was pulled out of her house. They were taken to the center of Beijing and ridiculed for hours. And the wife was forced to wear Western clothing as a symbol of humiliation and decadence. Now, here's the thing. There was no one to stop them because something else happened. The 16 points. Basically, the 16 points said, it had a lot of different things, but the two really big things that it said. One was that people should only be attacked verbally, not physically. In most instances, that was pretty much ignored. Now, people were attacked verbally. In fact, this is something really interesting to consider. People were attacked verbally, so many people were not physically attacked. And this happened. There's a lot of stories. A lot of people were not physically attacked, but they were verbally attacked and denounced as capitalists, so much so that they committed suicide. And so this is the sort of climate which is people actually cared what people were saying. They cared so much so that some capitalist voters actually committed suicide over their shame and disgrace of betraying the revolution. And again, this is the upshot of having free speech, is you can actually say what you want, and oftentimes it's violent, even if not physically violent. And the other big thing is Mao said that the Red Guards were not to be touched by the PLA. The People's Liberation Army was not to interfere with the students. The students could do whatever they wanted. And they did, frequently. Often against party officials, often against each other, often against whoever they thought was capitalist, or in some cases, in the worst cases, against people who were coming in on their territory, right? If they were really just a bunch of street gangs. But mass movement after mass movement happened. The Red Guards were key in regards to fighting or destroying the Four Olds. There was a mass mobilization, again, to destroy the Four Olds, which were old customs, old culture, old habits, and old ideas. And the idea was, and everyone was encouraged to participate, to think up new ways to practice socialism, to think up new ways to continue the revolution. Everyone from an illiterate peasant to, a university professor. And again, this is one of the downsides. This one I don't think is at all a downside. Is the Red Guards would often smash artifacts. They would burn Buddhist scrolls. They would destroy, priceless monuments from early China. But here's the real question, and this is a really interesting question the Cultural Revolution raised. I mean, if you talk to anyone who does artifacts, Chinese artifacts, Asian artifacts, most of them will tell you that the Cultural Revolution was horrifying. It was devastating because of all the destruction of old artifacts. But something to consider, who are we to tell the Chinese people what their culture is worth? And if they decided, which they did during the Cultural Revolution, that the new ideas, a new society, was more important than holding on to this old past that had continued to dominate them for thousands of years, who are we to tell them otherwise? Now, again, obviously, and there were many who would defend these artifacts. And that was the very essence of the democracy, is if you could get enough people to decide to smash a temple, they would smash a temple. If you didn't want to smash the temple but wanted to turn it into a school, you could turn it into a school, as long as you had the democratic support of the people.